I've been thinking about why kids don't play outside as much anymore and how a lot of them are trapped into a bit of an online or suburban nightmare. And that freedom of childhood is being taken away from many children. These new build neighbourhoods that are popping up at a rate of knots all around the UK in the greenery out with the towns or on the outskirts really aren't built with children and their childhood in mind. A lot of housing estates in the suburbs and outskirts of town need a car in order to have any sort of life. Often they're so far removed from amenities and things to do, or these things to do and amenities have actually closed down. I went into more detail about this on this video. But there's a real reliance on cars nowadays, and it's normal for homes to have 2 or 3 cars each. Parking on new build homes especially hasn't taken this into account. And now the curbs in these sort of neighbourhoods are filled with a sea of cars. Children no longer have even the space to play outside like we used to. It's so claustrophobic being just on the street. It's just so many cars that you have to watch out for. Gone are the days of being able to play carefree, for example. There's no curbs left. A lot of these roads are very narrow, so these excess cars have to park up on the curb, taking up the whole pavement, so the kids can't even play safely there. Or they have the pressure of having to avoid damaging all these cars, or they're just constantly having their play interrupted by the constant in and out of traffic because there is such an increase in dependence on cars nowadays. So many of these housing estates are so built up that they don't have the green areas for the kids to play in either. Or even if you do find one, the amount of no ball games and no loitering signs that you see nowadays is so unwelcoming for kids, and kids are so discouraged to be able to be themselves outdoors. Neighbours nowadays are strangers. People don't stay in the same place long enough a lot of the time to even become friends, or they just don't bother being friends with their neighbours. Gone are the days of introducing yourself to your neighbours, getting to know them, looking out for each other even.
People still talk to their neighbors. I feel like when I was growing up, we used to have dinner with our neighbors and barbecues and block parties and all this stuff. I knew everybody. Now, I feel like everybody just stays inside their house and looks through the window to see if anything is going on.
It's very cold nowadays. When I lived in the suburbs, it was bizarre because nobody talked to each other. There was an air of competition in the air. People would get a new car and then the next person would get the new car and the next person would. It was this keeping up with the Joneses. Somebody would do their lawn and that would start a domino effect. But there was no talking to each other, no offering to do each other's lawns. I remember just feeling so disappointed about my experience living in these suburbs, which is where I moved to try and get more of a sense of community. But nobody would talk to each other. It would feel like you were inconveniencing or annoying them when you did try. And the most bizarre thing was that there were so many kids living in the area and in the street, but nobody would be playing outside. You would hear them playing in their own back gardens. That was about as far as it went. It was very much an individualistic feeling where each house was cordoned off from the rest. This is my area, nobody else would intermingle at all. And when I was growing up, we knew everybody on the street. Parents knew each other and kids were just out mixing with everybody. Everybody would look out for each other and there was so much more freedom. I remember that my neighbours, I would see their kids just bouncing constantly on trampolines, just stuck in these tiny little suburban gardens, unable to go out at all. Their parents just wouldn't let them. And this wasn't just a one-off. This was so common. It seems like many neighbours are very grumpy as well nowadays, especially when it comes to children and children's normal natural behaviour, which they end up needing to suppress because maybe a neighbour complains about the noise that they're making or the fact that they stepped one little foot onto their grass. Gone seem to be the days of big water fights where all the neighbourhood kids would have great fun together, making quite a bit of noise, but that wasn't seen as a bad thing. The sound of children playing was music for the streets and for the community, whereas now these sterile environments also seem to want this sterile silence at all times. And this intolerance for noise really does seem very focused on children, because there was no end of people just playing their music out loud or letting their dogs bark for hours on end. The same people that would be quick to make a noise complaint about a child having a little bit too much fun. I think that many people and families living in these sort of areas are very overworked, overstressed and frazzled, so their tolerance for anything else is zero, it's zilch. They can seem to handle minor annoyances, or maybe they've lost that joy in their life. You know, the sound of children is now a really bad thing for them, and they'll be quick to just go off the rails or complain. So many children probably feel very unwelcome in their own environment, their own street, and they might become quite reluctant, especially after having had an incident. They might feel more reluctant to go out. When you looked out onto the street, you could see how uninspiring it was as well. So many new build areas are like soulless grey boxes. You've got just this sterile feel about them. There's no greenery, no trees. Everything's just cookie cutter, the same. And it's not an inspiring place to be that you want to spend time in. You don't really want to go outdoors and have a walk around. Where are you going to walk to? The green spaces, the fields are getting built over constantly. It's just this stretch of these white boxes everywhere you go now. It's like housing developers have the same blueprint that they follow for every development. So everything just looks the same, and it's very depressing. And living in these new build areas, you don't have that natural access to these old parks or forests. It's all out in the middle of nowhere. You need a car or transport to get there. So kids are basically trapped in a suburban nightmare. They don't have a natural environment in order to be kids, where kids really thrive. I think kids thrive having that freedom to go out and just get mucky, you know, get into a bit of a mess, just have fun, ride their bikes with reckless abandon out to nowhere, go and explore some abandoned areas or overgrown grass. Most people live a very overscheduled life nowadays, and this applies to both children and parents. Parents are stretched for time. Their time is filled from waking up right through to bedtime.
When you have kids, your life literally becomes a treadmill of work, children, work, children, work, children. You're up all night 2-3 times, not getting any sleep because they're awake. Then they wake up at 5:30. Getting them ready, getting the household ready, going out to work at 7-8 o'clock in the morning, working all day, or looking after the kids at home all day because they're not well. The second you get back in the door from work, you're making dinner, like the second. Then it's bath time, bedtime routine, and then it's like 8-9 o'clock in the evening and it's time for you to go to bed. There's not a second of the day when you're free. And it's like that 7 days a week. Who said that was a good idea? You're constantly sleep deprived and constantly doing things for other people. It's wild.
It used to be that one parent would work and the other parent could look after the household and the children, whereas now it's normal for both parents to have to work and run their entire life and household out with their working hours. So they're trying to spin all plates. Every day probably just feels like a blur for a lot of parents. Kids as well, their schedules are so packed full compared to how I remember mine. I had so much more freedom when I was a kid. It was normal to have your school day and then out with that, get your homework done as quickly as possible, then outside for as long as possible. Whereas now, kids have all these activities. A lot of parents need their children to have these activities just to allow for their work day, because they need to work so much in order to keep everybody afloat. Add that to if you're living in these suburban areas where there's not much for kids to do in the vicinity, and they usually need access to a lift to get anywhere. But parents are so overstretched, overworked, and exhausted that they don't have the time for the luxury to be able to take their children anywhere. Or there's no time left after their after school activities, dinner, etc. There's just no time left for kids to go out. With the way that life feels so fast now, there just doesn't seem to be enough minutes, never mind hours in the day. And suddenly it's time for bed and time to do everything all over again. It seems like it's a kind of a joke now that parents are so stressed and frazzled, but that shouldn't be the norm. They shouldn't be under such pressure and stress at all times. And this in turn feeds onto the kids. It's not good for everybody to have so much pressure. There's the pressure for kids to academically achieve so much now at such a young age that the importance of allowing them just time to be kids has been forgotten. And the importance of allowing them time to be bored has been forgotten. And that leads me on to technology and how the house is no longer a boring place for children. Children now have access to so much addictive entertainment in their house. So why would they go out when they've got everything at their beck and call?
Dad, could I come inside now?
Dawson, you are grounded. No.
Well, all my friends tell me that when they're grounded, they're not allowed to go outside.
Well, it's different for you because you would rather be inside. Your punishment is to be outside. You need to be a kid. Do something.
Well, there's nothing to do out here.
There's a lot of things you can do.
Like
You
what?
climb a tree, jump a fence. I don't really care. Go ding dong ditch the neighbor.
So boring.
It's not boring. You have to be creative.
What?
Add that to the fact that every other kid they know has access to this as well. Who are they left to go out with even if they wanted to? The streets a lot of the time are just empty. All the socializing has been moved online. They have access to online games that they can meet up with their friends, and maybe that will give the illusion of socializing, but it's not the same. It's not developing them in the same way. It's detrimental to their health. Kids aren't out moving as much. They're not getting used to socializing with adults when they go round to their friend's house to go in for their friends. And many kids are growing up not able to socialise or function in the real world. It can't be a coincidence that there's such an increase in mental health problems, anxiety, delays in children. Also, the endless options when it comes to online games, TV shows, TV programs, just constant access to different entertainment. There's not a shared interest like there used to be back in the day, where all kids that you knew would have this shared hobby or passion. Something would really take off and they would go crazy for it, but it would be a shared joy, if that makes sense. Whereas now it's very individualistic. People are watching their own programs. It's not a shared excitement or a point of discussion, or they're playing their own game. It's adding to this loneliness and perpetuating this individualistic society that kids are growing up in nowadays.
What do kids your age do nowadays?
Our generation nowadays, they watch phone a lot and everything. It's like how people are alcoholic, they're phoneaholic. They don't move away from their phones. I've seen many kids, they scream at their parents and not take their phone or something away because they're so addicted to that channel, whatever they're watching. Nowadays, we have a park opening in our city and barely anyone comes there.
Social media and constant access to news has increased such fear in parents and there's a lot of helicopter parents now. And I completely understand why, because it's enough to put me off having children. I don't know if I could handle the stress of worrying about my child going out. And us adults already see that increase in crime and see how our towns and cities are changing beyond recognition. So of course, parents are going to worry stupid about their kids. How could they not? It's not the same place that we grew up in. There's no avoiding that. So even if you want your kids to have that freedom that you had, it's like that's been taken from us with how the world has changed so much. It must be so hard as parents to strike a balance between wanting to give your children more freedom, but also being aware of the dangers. Because when you're hyper aware of all these dangers, how can you put them to the back of your mind? And if something did happen, you would never be able to forgive yourself. I mean, even the increase in dog ownership is really having an effect on children's freedom to be kids. I can't walk out in the UK without being surrounded by a lot of unhinged dogs and very reckless owners. They'll go barking mad at you, they'll come running up to you, they'll be quite aggressive. It seems like the dogs have gone a bit crazy too. And children are, of course, very vulnerable targets for this. I've also noticed a lot of play parks being taken up by people who shouldn't be there, or again, dog owners taking over them and letting their dogs use it as a dog park. It seems like children are the ones that come last. A lot of people say that the world isn't more dangerous now than it was, but I don't believe that for a minute. I can see it with my own eyes. I can feel the changes when I go out. I'm not as carefree as I once was, even 5 years ago. How fast things have changed is insane. And the thought of letting my children go out like I used to, I feel like they've been robbed of that freedom and of that childhood that all of us got. It just no longer seems to exist in the way the world now works. Of course, this doesn't apply to all parents, all children, in all areas. Of course it doesn't. There's so many children out there having brilliant childhoods. I'm more focusing on these newer build suburban neighbourhoods that used to have a lot more life. I had a great childhood in them, but something, the spark and the life in them seems to have been sucked out. And even if, say, young adults want to go and spend time with their friends that are a bit further out from their area, just getting there is really dangerous because there's not that walkability, there's constant cars, the roads and cars are what comes first. They're not accessible a lot of the time with public transport. And not to mention, public transport is so expensive. I wouldn't have been able to afford it when I was younger. But I had such easy access to everything around me. These newer areas just keep you trapped and indoors, hooked onto the internet, essentially. A side issue that all of this also leads to, in my opinion, is how children are growing up far too quickly. They're online so much that they have access to all sorts of things that they shouldn't. And it's causing them so much anxiety. They shouldn't be stressing about these things. It's not anything that I was even concerned about when I was younger. I was just left to be a kid. I had the freedom to be a kid, and they're having that taken away from them, an optimal childhood of freedom. And it's no wonder with how we're all having to live now or just trying to survive now. It's not conducive with the childhood that we all fondly remember. But I do see murmurings of this perhaps changing. Parents are starting to realise the detrimental effect of technology on their kids, of the loneliness that kids are experiencing, and saying something is not right. And they're starting to see that the power really lies with them in order to start the changes. And I think that children naturally do want that childhood. They want that freedom and that joy of just getting to be kids. They'll naturally do that if given the opportunity, but it's down to us. Thanks for watching.